This time, I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. I'll ask our board members to identify themselves for the record as I call your name. Todd Ferrante, present. William Buchanan.
Present.
Katie Adams.
Present.
John Andes.
Present.
William Gordy.
Present.
Elaine McConis cannot be with us today. And Donald Smack.
Present.
Okay. We do have a quorum. So I will need a motion to approve the budget work session agenda for February 7th, 2023.
Motion.
I have a motion by Donald Smack. Can I have a second?
Second, Bill Gordy.
A second by Bill Gordy. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. Today, Mr. Vince Tolbert will lead us in the invocation. Vince? Please stand for the pledge keep standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Please bow your heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you so much for all your many wonderful blessings. We're thankful for this wonderful, beautiful February day. We're thankful for everyone who's come out today to participate in this meeting. We're so thankful for our wonderful school system, Lord, for our amazing kids and dedicated staff and all the great things that are happening. We ask you to be with this board, Lord, and the staff as we continue to develop this budget for FY24. Let's be able to continue to provide the resources that we need as a school system. All this we ask in your precious name. Amen.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Vince, thank you for that invocation.
You're welcome.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Taylor for the superintendent's report. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Ferrante, and good morning to everyone, and thank you for being here today in this very, very important meeting. First, I would like to extend my thanks for everyone who is present with us for the budget session here today and those watching us on the live stream. New technology allows us to do a lot of great things. I'd like to also give a special thanks this morning to Mr. Vince Tolbert and his department for their hard work and preparations, not only for today's meeting, but for our budget preparations in general. It is a lot of work. I know we are all proud to have such a great team keeping us on the right physical path each and every year that we work on our budget. Now, as we begin to dive into today's work session, I want to remind everyone of the theme that emerged from the public input meeting we held in December. The overwhelming sentiment, as it is each year, was once again to ensure our educators and staff receive a fair compensation package. The entire leadership team and I are committed to keeping that as a top priority for our FY 2024 budget. And I also want to commit, I know they have representation here today, to do the same for our bus contractors. This has to be a priority for us as our compensation packages is the driving force behind our ability to attract and retain high-quality professionals both within the classroom and beyond. As we navigate this budget process, I want to express my gratitude for the great working relationship we have fostered with this board and our county commissioners. I am so proud to say that through our collaboration, our budget requests during my tenure as superintendent have been fully funded the past 6 years, which is an incredible, incredible accomplishment. When I say fully funded, meaning the commissioners funded what we presented to them. As you all know, the success of our schools financially lies with our county government, as they control 80% of our budget. I am incredibly proud of the open communication that we have established, and I am confident that our continued success is due in large part to the foundational relationship that we have. I'm also excited to welcome them later today, right here in this room, when we reconvene for a special presentation on the on the blueprint for Maryland's future. Lastly, as we continue with our work this morning, I will once again charge each and every one of us to keep our eyes focused on what's best for the thousands of students that we are responsible for each and every day. We must continue to ask ourselves, as we discuss each point, is this good for kids? How will this make our school system better for all the children in our care? I know that I know that as long as every decision we make is centered around our students, we will be making confident strides to continued success in our outstanding school system here in Worcester County. Now back to you, and thank you, Mr. Ferrante.
And thank you, Mr. Taylor. I appreciate that. I'd now like to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Vince Tolbert, and he will give us a review of the budget for FY24. Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Ferrante. Good morning, everybody. What I wanted to do today, take a few minutes just to walk you through a PowerPoint that kind of highlights where we are in the budget process. We're still relatively early on, so I'm going to share what we know at this point in time, and after that I'll take any questions, and then I'll sit down and I'll walk the board through the budget by categories, our 13 categories. So for FY23, our current year, our budget total is $124,268,259. Of that, $101,188,605, or a little over 81%, comes from county appropriations. As Mr. Taylor said earlier, we depend heavily on our county commissioners to fund our budget. And just for everyone's information, if you go to our neighboring counties in Somerset, Dorchester, or Wacomico, this is going to be flipped, where they probably get 80% of their funding from the state and very little from the county. But the state considers us a very wealthy county, and the burden falls on our county to fund our budget. Some budget considerations for next year. The Bus Contractor Association came before the board on December 6th at our public input meeting and shared their request. I just want to review those with the board now. Their request included they increased the mileage rate from $1.62 to $1.80, to increase the hourly rate from $25 to $30, to eliminate the 10% increase requirement before the fuel supplement begins. We've always had a fuel supplement in place, and the way that works is that we have a base amount. So for this year, it's $3.35. And when the price of diesel fuel goes 10% above that, $3.35 base, for this year, $3.68, the fuel supplement kicks in. And for every 7 cents above that rate, the bus contractors receive 1 additional penny on their fuel reimbursement. What they're proposing is do away with the 10% requirement, and at $3.36, the fuel supplement would start to kick in. They're also requesting an administrative fee on the buses from $3,500 to $6,000, and to increase the minimum trip from $85 to $175, and to add 2 cents to the mileage rate for the diesel exhaust fluid. Diesel buses have to put this fluid in their engines every so many miles to meet emissions requirements, and they're asking for some additional reimbursement on the mileage rate to cover that expense for the diesel buses. And they're also asking to increase the spare bus from $6,489 to $7,500. So those are the requests that the bus contractors submitted. We're not suggesting that we fund all this, but that's what's on the table from the bus contractors. Any questions on the bus contractor's proposal? Also, we're looking at health insurance rates for next year. The Health Benefits Committee is currently meeting. That committee is made up of members of the county government, the Board of Ed, and both our teachers and our support staff. We've had several meetings. We're still working to finalize rates, and it'll probably be March when we actually know the increase for health insurance for next year. Salary negotiations are ongoing with both our support staff and with our teachers. And just for the board's information, a step next year would be $1,205,447, and a 1% COLA for all employees next year would cost $749,998. Also, there is an increase in our budget for the Apple iPad refresh. We just redid the lease with Apple last year, and most of the increase is tied to when we did the original lease back in FY20, we were doing Shallow Elementary School, and those iPads were purchased with school construction money. So when we did the refresh, it makes sense to have those iPads included in the lease and not outside. So that's why that increase in the Apple iPad lease for next year. Some other requests. Right now, we just did finish meeting with our schools with their individual budget meetings with the superintendent and executive team. During those meetings, there were requests for different positions. The superintendent and his staff are reviewing those requests and may bring some of those positions forward when we adopt the budget in March. Also to be determined is increases related to the Maryland Blueprint, college and career ready costs, and also national board certified fees could increase as we get more NBC qualified teachers. For FY '24 for one-time capital request, once again, we met with the schools. They did have some requests, and we're currently evaluating those requests and could bring some of those projects forward for the board's approval in March. For revenue next year, the state did release their draft numbers on January 20th, and the state aid increase is going to be $2.86 million next year for us, which for Worcester County, that's a rather large increase. And the reason why, the main reason driving that is the state changed the way that they count comp ed. For direct certification, let me go back, free and reduced meals kids. You can fill an application to be qualified, or you can be directly certified if your family receives food stamps. Those type of programs, they're directly certified. For this year, for the first time, Maryland said if you have any kind of Medicaid assistance in your house, that's automatically going to qualify you for free and reduced meal status, which means those families didn't have to fill an application. They're automatically included in the comp ed count. So a lot of families, especially kids, middle school and high school, don't want to fill out the application. This automatically includes those kids if they're receiving Medicaid assistance. So we increased about 600 students in our comp ed count because of that change. And that was almost $2 million of the $2.8 million increase we're seeing in state aid next year. MSD has not released all the information we need to calculate MOE for next year from our county government. That should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. For the calendar, the board is scheduled to adopt our budget on the March 21st meeting, and this is also a change. When I first started with the board, we always adopted our budget in March. Back in 2010 or 11, the county commissioners started requesting it early. They wanted it by the first week of March, so the board had adopted our budget in February. This year, we talked to county leadership, county commissioner president, county administrator, and they said they're fine getting our budget the last week in March, which means we can adopt our budget a little bit later, which gives us a little bit more time, a little bit more flexibility. Any questions on anything I went over? All right, thank you. I'll sit down now and go through the budget categories with the board. The board should have an exhibit in front of you. The first couple pages are just a memo that highlights what I just reviewed. If you move on to page 1 of our budget categories, it's the category of administration. It's on pages 1 through 4. This includes costs related to the Board of Ed, the Superintendent's Office, Finance, Human Resources. There's no increases requested at this time. It will be updated as we finalize negotiations for any salary increases that are included. Any questions on administration? Okay. If you move on to the next category on pages 5 through 8, it's instructional support. This category includes costs related to principals, assistant principals, school secretaries, coordinators here at the central office. Once again, there's no identified increases, but that will be updated when we finish negotiations, hopefully later this month. Moving on to page 9. That's the category of instructional salaries and wages. This is our largest category as far as expenditure goes, and that includes expenses for teacher salaries, educational assistants, substitute teachers. No increases in there at this time, but they will be updated for the salaries once we finalize our negotiations. Moving on to pages 11 and 12, that's the categories of textbooks and classroom supplies. There is the one increase noted on page 12 for the Apple iPad refresh that I talked about a few minutes ago. We're asking for $93,949 more on that fourth line down from the top. Moving on to page 13 through 16, that's other instructional cost. This includes things like such as consultants, copying contracts, internet services to provide internet to our schools and central office. Band and music equipment is included in this category. School furniture. On page 16, you'll notice there is some items in blue, and basically I'm just proposing to do some budgetary transfers to actually align the budget better with actual expenditures. no increases, just kind of realignments. On pages 17 through 20 is the category special education. This includes expenses related to special education teachers, special ed EAs, the cost related to Cedar Chapel School, and once again, the salaries will be added when we finish negotiations. Moving on to pages 21 and 22, student personnel. This basically includes the cost of our pupil personnel workers. No increases at this time. Pages 23 and 24 is the category of student health. This includes the cost basically of our school nurses that work in our schools. That'll also be updated when we finish salary negotiations. Page 25 through 28 is student transportation. This includes the cost to run our transportation office and also includes the costs related to our bus contractors. Right now, it doesn't have any increases in there, but they will be determined based on what we decide on the bus contractor increases that I just reviewed earlier. Pages 29 through 34 is operation of plant. The big items in this category are our school custodians, our computer technicians, services such as trash removal, alarm monitoring, utilities is a big one that's in this category. And once again, we'll update salaries when we finish negotiations and put those increases in. Sure.
I have a question on utilities. Do we anticipate an increase from the ESMEC Energy Trust on the cost of energy?
Yes, we do. Rates have been increased through ESMEC the past couple of cycles, and we're actually, even though our usage is a little bit, about the same, a little bit less than it was last year, we're about 20% more in expenditures this year because of increases in electricity and natural gas and those kind of things. Good question, Dr. Andes. On pages 35 through 39 is a category of maintenance of plant. This includes the cost of our maintenance staff and other costs related to maintaining our buildings. On pages 40 and 39 and 40 is the category of fixed charges. This includes employee benefits, FICA, health insurance, local share teacher pension. Those kind of expenses are included in fixed charges.
Mr. Tolbert,
Yes.
just a quick question in regard to health insurance. Do you have any idea or anticipated idea of what the increase may be in the health insurance?
At this time, we're still meeting with the Health Benefits Committee. I do anticipate an increase this year. We've been blessed over the past 4 years. We've had 2 years of either a decrease and then 2 years, so 4 years of either a decrease or no rate increase at all. Mm-hmm. So it's been a good 4-year period for our employees and for all of us. But we are seeing some inflation with medical costs and supplies. So I do anticipate that health insurance will increase next year, Mr. Fronte.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also add for anyone, our Health Insurance Committee is in conjunction with the county. We have representation on that committee. Mr. Tolbert is on that committee. Dr. App is on that committee. I believe Ms. Shockley Lynch, representing the Teachers Association, is on that committee. So we are on the same plan, for those who may not know that, as the county is on.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Moving on to capital planning on pages 41 through 43. This is just the cost associated with our facilities planner. We have one, Mr. Joe Price, and he has half of a secretary. That's included in that category. Moving on to page 44, technology for $200,000. We're not asking for any increase at this time. And right behind that is capital improvements of $100,000. That's just to address any concerns that come up throughout the year. And then the last page is school construction projects, one-time thing. There may be some of those projects included when we come back to you in March. So that kind of summarizes where we are, outlines the categories for the board's information. Certainly I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Board members, anyone have any questions for Vince?
I have a question about the iPads.
Sure.
It's page 12. Can you tell me what it means to increase the $93,000 for the updates on the iPads? What's actually taking place? Is it for existing iPads of the students or teachers or everyone involved?
It's both student and teacher devices. Back in FY20, we went with the iPad Apple lease, which was great because it worked out perfectly when we went online because of COVID. It was a 4-year lease. Apple came to us last spring and said because of the current market with devices, it would be in our best interest to renew that lease early and get new devices that were updated in the hands of our students and staff. So we made the decision to do that. And as I said earlier, when we did the initial lease, that year we were finishing up Shell Elementary School, the new school, and there was construction money to buy those iPads for teachers and staff at that school. So we bought those outside of the lease. But going forward, it makes sense to have all the devices in the same lease, in the same lease cycle. So that $93,000 really represents the increased cost of bringing Shell students and staff into the lease. And cases in Apple Care, too. Yep. Thank you, Dee. To answer your question, Ms. Addis.
Ms. Addis, did Vince ask if he
I'm
could
sorry.
answer, if he answered your
Yes,
question?
you did. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
And I had one more question too. As far as the bus contractors, when is that? I know that you had everything proposed on the screen, but when is that going to be decided and finalized?
We're still in the process, and certainly if the board would like to give some direction to us at this point, they certainly could. But we're still negotiating with our teachers and our support staff to see what that raise is going to be, if any, and so that the bus contractor increase will probably come as part of that overall recommendation to the board at the March meeting.
If I can speak, please.
Sure.
Ms. Addis, my hope is in the next 30 days to have all of our negotiations and our meet and confer with the bus contractors all decided. Those really aren't made public. Why? Because of rights of negotiations.
Right.
And so it's our goal within 30 days or less to have all this settled. And I will tell you, based on what I've been told, all the negotiations are going well as far as communications and people talking. Whether we can come to an agreement, that'll be the final thing. But right now, everything seems to be moving down the road as effectively as we can. The other issue that is important is that we can take a contract over, but I also get some feedback from our elected officials who fund it. Mm-hmm. So I try to, whatever information they share with me as superintendent, I try to share with our negotiating teams as well as our folks who talk with our bus contractors moving forward as well, to try to make some sense that we can get that agreement moving forward, and you all will be filled in as soon as that agreement's been reached.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Tolbert? Vince, thank you. You always do a thorough job, and we appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, Mr. Fonte. Thank you.
Okay. This time, it's time for public comment. Any individuals who've signed up to address the Worcester County Board of Education may do so for 2 minutes regarding information, commendation, or concerns which may need future board attention. Concerns that are specific to an individual will not be discussed in open session and should be directed to appropriate district personnel for investigation. When you are called to address the board, please state your name and address for the record. And I don't see anybody on the sign-up sheet. Is there anyone out there that would like to speak at this time? Okay, and seeing none, we will move forward. The next regular session, Worcester County Board of Education meeting will be February 21st, 2023, in the Sarah D. Thompson Board Meeting Room in Worcester County Board of Education Central Office, 6270 Worcester Highway, Newark, Maryland. The open session will begin at 11 a.m. and will immediately consider voting to convene in closed session under the general provisions of Article 3-305B of the Annotated Code of Maryland. The board will reconvene in open session at 12:30, and the board meeting regarding information is posted on the website, www.worcester-12.org, located at board meeting / board docs. This time, the board will break for lunch, where we are going to be meeting with the Worcester County Commissioners, and they will join the board, and then we will reconvene an open session at 1 p.m. in the auditorium here at Worcester Tech High School. So I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there any other discussion, any other questions? Well, recessing. Excuse me. I rescind that. We will not adjourn, but we will recess. So does anyone else have any questions? Seeing none, we are officially recessed. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. exception of Eric Fiore, everyone is here. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today. I'd also like to recognize Sheriff Matt Crisfoli and Deputy Chief Nate Passwaters who have joined us, and also our WCTA representative, Beth Shocklin Lynch. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Taylor to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrante, and thank you. I extend the same to the commissioners and our elected officials and staff as well from the, if I'm ringing here or not, who are here as well to hear about something that's going to drive education for the next 10 to 12 years, past some of us in this room. But we've got to prepare now, and we've got to move forward as we begin to educate, continue to educate. I'm going to slide this down because I'm getting a ringing sound. Continue to educate our young people. Before that, I get the easy part of the job today. And before I get into the Maryland Blueprint, I want to share some great news with you. And so this is really hot off the press. It's only been a week or two since we've gotten the information, but that is our testing scores for last year that we were given about 2 weeks ago. So if we can go ahead and put the first one up. I'm looking at a screen here and you're looking here, so we'll try to do this right. 5 things I want to share about our testing scores this year. First and foremost, our KRA, which is our kindergarten readiness scores. We were #1 in the state of Maryland out of the 24 jurisdictions, by far. If you look, we're at 73, and our next county's at 55, almost 20 percentage points above the next county. That means our pre-K3, thank you for investing in our pre-K 3 and 4, and our child care centers in the county have a big play in this to prepare our kids for kindergarten. So Worcester County, out of the 24 jurisdictions, was #1, okay? #1. And so I could elaborate more on that, but I don't want to take a lot of time. I just want to share those with you moving forward. So go ahead to the next one. So 4 areas that I want to talk about is certainly math and English in grades 3 through 8, and then Algebra 1 and our English 10 scores. Beginning with our English language arts grades 3 through 8, we finished #1 in the state. #1 in the state. And you can see where we are. It's an alphabetical order, and or that we're down, it starts at the bottom. I'm thinking it should be at the top and work down, so we're always on the bottom of the scale there, but that means we're #1 in English language arts in grades 3 through 8. And you can see there was only one other school on the Eastern Shore that finished even close. Queen Anne's was #3. But again, we were #1 there as well. And again, I could elaborate, but I just want to give you the statistics as we got them. Go ahead, Carrie. Mathematics grade 3 through 8, we finished #2. #2 to Carroll County by 1 percentage point. Now, I'm going to talk about the work that we've got to do with this, but I'm giving you the 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland, okay? So again, #2 there, 1 percentage point away. Carrie? Algebra 1, we were #2, tied for second with Carroll. They got us listed as third, but we were #2. So far we're 1 in KRA, we're 1 in English in our younger grades, and then we've been 2 and 2 in math, and now Algebra 1, we finished tied for second with Carroll. And #4, our English 10 scores, we finished second. Now, we're the only county in the state of Maryland that finished first or second in every area. The only county, which, based on these results, we're the highest performing school system in the state of Maryland. I'm going to tell you the good news first. We're the highest performing school system in the state of Maryland. Somebody asked you the question, why are we spending the money we spend on education? Here's your results. And thank you, commissioners, for believing in Worcester County Public Schools to take that chance and put the money up so that we can remain at the highest level. And Yes, go ahead and clap. I see people wanting to clap back there. Thank you for clapping for that, because we're excited about it. So again, Worcester County Public Schools is performing. Now, we still have work to do, and we're going to celebrate this because our math across the state scores are not where they should be. There's a number of factors because of that, and we're working on that. Part of the factor is I don't know that Maryland has the tests, or the results that, the assessments that we are assessing our kids with in the right place. There's some work that has to be done across the state of Maryland. I do know that the pandemic dropped everybody back. And the state wants to tell us that that's the only reason that our math scores across the state are lower than they should be. They are lower than they should be, and we're going to work here in Worcester County to get those up. We've got a lot of things in place. We're preparing for that. But I can also tell you it's not the only thing. There are some things with the assessments that Ms. Shores, Dr. Wallace, and those who work in the academic arena are working with the state and other counties to take a look at. But I will tell you, I'm extremely proud of this school system and where we are today, with still work to do. So I wanted to share that moving forward. More to come on that. We've just gotten the results. We're digging into a number of different things. It even breaks it down by school, by student, and we're looking at all the way down to the fine point of where each individual kid is in our school system. But I'm grateful for what this school system is doing and very proud moving forward. Wanted to share that before we move into the blueprint. Shifting gears with you for just a minute. The Maryland Blueprint is something, the blueprint for the Maryland future, I call it the Maryland Blueprint, is something that's going to drive us for the next 10 to 12 years. As I attend meetings across the state, I'm grateful to be in Worcester compared to what some others are dealing with, but the challenging part for us is they're building the airplane as it's going down the runway. And in some cases, they're building the airplane as if it's taking off. And so that worries me, really worries me where that we will land. The things that worry me is the things that the commissioners probably have as a number one priority. Is that me? Okay. Yes, it was. Maybe I didn't. What happened? I think when Dr. Wallace walked by me.
Excuse me, Superintendent Taylor. I needed to reopen the meeting because I forgot to do that, so I apologize. So we're now, I thought that I did say that we were reconvening, but I need a motion to reconvene. So I need a motion to reconvene the meeting. Motion by Donald, second by Bill. We are now reconvening in open session.
Is that all? I can go? Maybe that's why that went off. But anyway, the biggest challenge that we're going to face is the price tag. Because in Annapolis, they're making decisions for all the locals. And then, as you know, we get the least amount of funding from the state of any jurisdiction in Maryland. Thus, they're requiring us to do certain things. You're going to hear about that today. What I want to tell you about the blueprint is that there are 5 pillars that will drive this. And each person that's going to come and talk about their pillar, my 4 assistants and 1 other person are leading each of those pillars. We were here last night till almost 9 o'clock with a steering committee going over the plan that has to be, the first phase of the plan that has to be submitted on March the 15th. And so there is tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of work that will go into the plans to put this together. And you're going to hear a little bit about it. We're going to try to keep you out of the weeds today. I know one of the concerns is, what are we going to have to spend, Lou? I've heard that from each of the commissioners. I've heard that from some of our board. What are we going to have to spend? And to be quite frank with you, I do not know. I don't know. I don't even know if the plan's going to change tomorrow, if it's going to change a month from now. Last month, in Annapolis at the superintendent meetings. Ike Leggett, remember that name, he is someone that the legislators have put in charge of the Maryland Blueprint, and Rachel Heiss met with the 24 superintendents for almost 2 hours, and he said these exact words: we're building that airplane as it's running down the runway, and we're going to make adjustments. Well, when you make adjustments, that means all the work we're doing could change overnight. I don't know an exact price tag. We can give you some ideas of where they are, and we will today. But again, please don't walk out there and say it's in stone that we're going to have to spend that money, because we really don't know at this point. And as we get information to our commissioners and to our board, we will get that information to you as soon as we know, as we move forward. And you're going to hear some of the dates and times of the requirements of the Maryland Blueprint today. As I said, there are 5 pillars. We're going to talk real briefly about each pillar, and to give you a snapshot of where we are. And also, I want to say that every county in Maryland is required to have a blueprint coordinator. A lot of counties are hiring that position and paying someone because it is a full-time job. Smaller counties like Worcester County can't afford to do that. And so Ms. Shorts is right now our designated blueprint coordinator. I will also tell you that Rachel Heiss and Ike Leggett said that they are trying to go before the legislators to get Annapolis to pay for a blueprint coordinator for every county. So more to come on that. And I know Dee always, when I tell her that, her eyes light up because that takes something off her plate. And last night I looked at her when we left the room last night at about 8:45, and she was mentally and physically exhausted from it. And Beth shaking her head because Beth was in there. And by the way, happy birthday today, Dee. Thank you. Yeah. So she stayed last night and did that. But not just Ms. Shorts, Mr. Tolbert, Dr. App, I don't know where he got to, Dr. Wallace, and Lauren Williams. Those 5 are leading this process with leading each of those pillars. And this document that they have to have ready for the state to look at is just an incredible amount of work. So I'll stop there, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Shorts, and she's going to walk you through it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone. So I am going to take you on a brief walk through the blueprint, and I know many of you are here to hear about more of the financial piece. I am going to take you on a little blueprint walk. So why the blueprint? And I'm not going to read the screen to you, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the why behind it. Many of you are familiar with Britt Kerwin, and this all took shape back in 2019 when there was a charge from the governor around figure out what the blueprint needs to look like, which is now called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And he had a charge to do some research around the finest worldwide school systems, both around best practices and equity. Look like. And in 2019, right around when the pandemic struck us, that's when the blueprint, or the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, was actually formed. And as Mr. Taylor said, those best practices really became pillars. And that's what the blueprint is formed around. So the early childhood, the high quality diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness, the resources for every student, and the governance and accountability, those are all the best practices that came out of Britt Kerwin's Commission. And we know that a lot of funding comes around that, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. Mr. Taylor also talked briefly about timelines, so we just thought we'd share a brief snapshot of the timelines. So, and I saw that some of you brought this document today in some way, shape, or form. This is the AIB plan, and this focuses on the school system as well as higher education of learning, child care centers, and all the aspects of the blueprint. But there's also a plan, and that was released in December of 2022, but there's also a plan that isn't inside of this that both the AIB and MSDE released in December that the school system has to complete. And that is due March 15th. And that is a template that we have to respond to that Mr. Taylor suggested that we were here till 9 o'clock last night working on. It will replace our master plan or our ESSA consolidated plan. If you remember the school system having to work on that, it's really our school improvement plan for our district. And it encompasses those 5 pillars. So we have to write narratives around those 5 pillars, respond to it. It'll go to the AIB and MSDE, and we'll get approval on that plan, on how we are approaching Maryland's blueprint. In July of 2023, the LEA will have to have its pathways in place, which is part of the blueprint. And in September of 2023, this is the interesting part. Mr. Taylor just showed us you all our very remarkable test scores. That was based on our MCAP scores. In 2023, MSD has to do an empirical study on MCAP to make sure that it truly does measure college and career readiness. So that may not even be the assessment we use moving forward, which those of us who have been in education a while know that sometimes the assessment does change. So part of the blueprint is that we have to study that assessment, and that will happen in September 2023. And then by July 2024, Dr. Apt will talk a little bit more about that. That's part of Pillar 2. We have to implement a career ladder. And then starting in July 2026, that starting teacher salary that many of us have heard about that is part of Pillar 2 comes into effect. And just so you know, Mr. Taylor very early on set up a structure for us around how we're going to tackle this work in Worcester County. And as he pointed out, we've developed a steering committee of which he and I are overseeing. We have a lot of stakeholders in that steering committee. And from that steering committee, we are going to be reaching out to a stakeholder group to provide feedback to our plan that's due March 15th. So we'll be advertising that on social media. We'll be reaching out to our SIACs around that. So if you're interested in tuning into any of those sessions, that'll be very public when we do those sessions. And also reporting to our Board of Education around that. And with doing that work, we have set up pillar groups. So each one of the pillars is working on the plan that's due on March 15th. Some of us, like Pillar 1, which I'm in charge of, has 27 questions that are due in March. Pillar 3, which is Dr. Wallace's, has 87. So it just depends on where we are and which amount of information they want to gather at this point. This is just phase 1 at this point. There will, in the following 2 years, this will cover. So the next part of our presentation is really going to highlight what pieces are a part of each of the pillars. And as the pillar leads talk about their pieces of the pillar, Mr. Tolbert's going to join us and talk more about possible costs that may be occurred due to what the pillars are requesting. So for early childhood, which is my pillar, one of the biggest asks or one of the biggest pieces of that pillar is the first bullet. And it's really, as much as it is new, it is very exciting because what it's asking now is that in the past, even though our 5-year-olds have always been ours, when the kids come to us in kindergarten, they've always been Worcester County Public School kids. And if they came to us in pre-K4, they were ours. We had some pre-K3 students, they were ours. But if they went to a child care center or if they were at home with their parents, we almost didn't track them or worry about what they were doing. Now, according to the blueprint, we really have to be tracking and following what kids are doing, whether they're in Worcester County Public Schools pre-K 3 and 4, or whether they're at Snow Hill Christian Nursery School, or whether they're at Little Lanes. So we really need to be reaching out to all the child care providers, providing assistance to them if those child care providers want to be a part of the blueprint. So those child care providers need to apply for blueprint monies and funds, and if they do, it is up to Worcester County Public Schools to reach out and make sure that those child care providers have the same resources and have the same amount of support that Worcester County Public Schools does. Because in the big picture, when they become 5 years old, which when you look down to the last bullet, improving student readiness for kindergarten, that's what we're doing through the blueprint. They're all our kids by the time they reach kindergarten. So those two bullets in between support the first bullet, increasing high quality early childhood education providers. We want to make sure that whether they're our child care providers in our pre-K 3 and 4 classrooms, or whether they're at a child care center, that they're the best people in front of all of our children. And we also want to make sure that those kids have expanded supports. Are they getting the correct services, whether they're in our schools or whether they're in child care centers? And again, that's the vision of Pillar 1 through the blueprint, that they're all our students and that they're going to be coming to us by 5 years old. So instead of having maybe old philosophy of we'll work with them once they cross our doors as 5-year-olds, we encompass all of them, even when they're 3 and 4-year-olds not yet at our schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tolbert, and he's going to talk about some of the projected costs that could come with Pillar 1.
Thank you, Dee. Thanks, Lauren. Some of the projected costs, and these are only projections. We don't know for sure what's going to happen. But when we build Buckingham Elementary School, which is our next capital project, we would like to add pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 at that location, which would be one additional pre-K teacher, one special ed teacher, and one assistant. So for both pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, that won't happen until FY 29. Buckingham Elementary School, if it stays on schedule, is supposed to kick off construction in December of 26, which is FY 27. It'll probably take 2 years for construction. So we wouldn't be asking for those positions until FY 29. And when we build Snow Hill Elementary School, which is the next capital project after Buckingham, that probably won't be complete until FY 33. We'll be asking for the same type of positions at Snow Hill Elementary School. Move the slide, Lauren. Oh, Dee's got it. Okay. And Dee talked about the early childhood learning centers. Right now, we only have 3 that have signed up to participate with Blueprint in the county. So right now, we're handling everything we need to handle what we have. In the future, if we have more early childhood centers participate, if it goes from 3 to 10 to 15 to 20, we may require some additional positions, such as a special education teacher, EL teacher, speech pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, and also some coaching positions are possible. But they're all if more early childhood centers come on and if those kids require those services. So it's so hard for me to sit here and tell you for sure what we're going to need next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. These are our best guesses of what may be required under Pillar 1. Are there any questions on that before we move on? Yes, sir.
The daycares that could participate, are they under the same salary requirements that so that the teachers in those daycares are going to be making $60,000?
Yes, sir, and they require benefits and they have to be
And who's paying
credentialed.
for that?
The Blueprint would pay for that, the Blueprint funds. They would have to apply, and within 3 years, they have to meet Excel 5 training, which is accreditation through MSDE.
So it's not going to be the county money, county taxpayer money is not going to be going toward that,
That's correct. It comes from the Blueprint funds,
which is still taxpayer money.
right. The challenge, Mr. Bertino, is that right now, Worcester County Public Schools has 3 daycare providers that have applied for Blueprint funds, and Montgomery County Public Schools has 3. Right now, the Blueprint funds does not cover the tuition that most daycare providers require. So they've got to up their tuition. Right now, they're paying about $200 per week for tuition, and most daycare providers get a little more than that. So we've put that all through our Pillar 1 that a lot of providers are not even applying for the grants. But yes, they have to be highly qualified teachers. They will start at $60,000. They will get benefits, and it'll be paid out of Blueprint funds. Yes.
How does this affect a homeschool building, this blueprint?
Well, it really wouldn't. You would still have the option to homeschool.
The requirements and all, are there requirements through the blueprint that they have to meet?
Nobody would be forced. Nobody would be forced. It will always be optional to apply for the Blueprint funds.
Can I have a quick reminder, if at the tables you're speaking, if you would take the mic because of the live stream that needs to pick up the sound, just grab it and rotate that mic around if you don't mind.
Any other questions around Pillar 1? Thank you so much. With that, we will move on to Pillar 2 and Dr. Apt.
Thank you, Dee. As Mr. Taylor said earlier, when the AIB said they were building this plane as it's going down the runway, the blueprint came to being in 2020 as House Bill 1300. It was a 245-page document at the time, and it was vetoed by Governor Hogan. It was overridden by the legislature and became law. So there's the first bill. Again, next year, here comes the next bill. You can see each year is starting to change. So the next bill, 2021, House Bill 1372, which started making some adjustments to the House Bill 1300. And then in 2022, we had House Bill 1450, which altered some of the funding formulas in the plan. So each session, something's being changed in this blueprint. So and I think we can expect more of that as well. In Pillar 2, I have the high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, and I'm going to go through these bullets fairly briefly and hopefully quickly for you. The first one is increase the rigor of educator licensures and prep programs. The bill doesn't only affect Worcester County Public Schools and all of the public schools, it also affects all of the higher education learning institutions in the state of Maryland as well. This talks to specifically kind of talks to those institutions. As of July 1st, 2025, the colleges and universities must change their teacher prep programs to have the programs go a year-long internship. The traditional internship for a teacher would be a semester. When we got our degrees, you do methods on one semester, you do student teaching on the next semester. This is changing, the blueprint changes it where now the student interns have to do a 180-day internship starting on July 1, 2025. Also, there'll be new requirements for those teachers to pass a national portfolio test as well as to pass some Maryland tests to get their teacher certification. The next bullet is improve educator compensation and working conditions. I want to give you some timelines on some of the compensation things. As of July 1st of 2022, we were mandated to give all national board certified teachers working with students in Worcester County an additional $10,000. We have 6 of those folks, so those 6 got an additional $10,000 this school year. That was mandated in the blueprint. Between July 1st, 19 and June 30th of 24, it is mandated in the legislation that teachers shall receive a 10% increase in their pay. Now, when we were discussing this over time, we had a lot of conversation with the AIB and other counties of what counts towards this 10%. And it was made very clear to us by the AIB, basically, COLAs count for the 10%. So we're on track. Worcester County we're on track to get there by 24. So we shouldn't have a problem making that or hitting that goal. Effective July 1st, 2026, which is FY27, the teaching starting salary, the $60,000, will be mandated as well. Currently, Worcester County is 21 out of 24 in the state of Maryland in starting teacher salary. On the shore, we are 7th out of 9 for starting teacher salary. And currently, we are at $49,709 as our starting salary. Institute new recruitment and professional development efforts. This part, in my office, we have to update our recruiting plans, be very specific of how we're recruiting diverse members of our teams. So in our group, we put together specific minority recruiting plans. We are going to specific areas to recruit, and so we have to look through an equity lens with all of our hiring, and that's also in our blueprint. Establish a statewide career ladder. We are currently working with our association, Beth's here, and we've had a couple meetings so far to see what that might look like. We don't have a model from the state. In the legislation, it tells us that we have to have 4 levels, basically. That's what we know. Level 1 is a new teacher coming in. Level 2 is a teacher working towards an NBC or a master's degree. Level 3 is a National Board Certified Teacher and Assistant Principals. And the career ladder then splits off in level 4 to a teacher leader track and a school leader track. So it's your administrators, as we know now, on one side, and your teacher leaders on the other side. The whole thing about the blueprint and the career ladder is they want to, or the state wants to, keep teachers in the classroom. That's the whole piece of the career ladder. The career ladder, I'm going to actually read this right from the legislation. We have to have that career ladder by the 2024, the guiding principles for that ladder, progression of the teachers in a manner that incentivizes them to go to the career ladder, a teacher salary that attracts teachers to the profession, a teacher salary that incentivizes teachers to opt into the career ladder, and a teacher salary progression as performance increases and demonstrated by teacher achieving National Board Certification. So National Board Certification is what this blueprint is tied to. They want folks to get the National Board Certification to go through a career ladder that is a performance-based pay system. Currently, we have a step pay system that's by years. So we could very well have 2 scales going, because at this point, folks do not have to go into the career ladder if they don't choose to. So that's stuff that the association and we're working on as well. And the last part I wanted to speak of is the reallocations of teaching time in the legislation. If folks are going onto the career ladder at levels 1, 2, or 3, they are expected to teach in the classroom for 60% of their workday. So some of you might say, well, what are they going to do on the other 40% of their workday? Well, the legislation says that the other 40%, they will be improving their instruction, identifying working with students and tutoring, working with the most challenging students, working with students living in concentrated poverty, and leading or participating in professional development. The other noteworthy thing in the legislation is principals are now recommended to teach 10% of their workday. Vice principals are mandated to teach 20% of their workday. So now we have our assistant principals that are going to be mandated to go into the classroom for about 90 minutes a day. So that's going to cause us to look at how we structure things down the road. So, Mr. Tolbert, you want to maybe talk about a few costs?
Thank you. And just going back to Pillar 1 real quick, I showed those positions that were going to be required if we had additional early childhood centers. And you asked about hiring teachers. The early learning childhood centers hire the regular ed teachers. But when those kids require special services, special ed, therapy services, coaching, all those kind of things, that falls on the responsibility of the school system to provide that to early childhood learning centers, just to clarify that. You maybe already knew it. Pillar 2 costs, Dwayne's already covered some of these. The first one, the salary increase of 10% from FY 20 to 24. We had 5 years to give a 10% increase in teacher salary. And we had a lot of discussion with the state over the years about what was included in that 10%. We said it was step and COLA. The state said no, steps don't count, that's automatic, it's only COLAs. So we went back and forth for a year and a half on that, but the bottom line, it's only COLAs that count toward that 10%. The good thing is we're on track to meet that in FY 24. The minimum teacher salary to $60,000 by 2026. As Dwayne said, our starting teacher salary right now is $49,700. If we maintain the integrity of our current scale, the way it's set up, it would require us to get 5% COLAs for the next 4 years to get to $60,000. So we have a work group now with our teachers union and with management to sit down and look at that requirement, how we're going to get there. It might require some scale compression to take some steps off our current scale to get to $60,000. But we're looking at those kind of things. But it's got to be negotiated. It goes through the collective bargaining process. We just can't make it up and go forward. It has to be something that's agreed to at the table with our teachers union. National board certification, $10,000 increase as soon as you get the NBC. There's also amounts that kick in at the first renewal, the second renewal, and the third renewal. So you get $10,000 when you get your NBC for the first time. When you renew it 5 years later, you get additional $8,000, then another $7,000, and another $7,000 on top of that. All cumulative is how it adds up. Currently, we only have 6 teachers that are NBC at $60,000. It's supposed to be a split 50-50 with the state, but because of our wealth-based formula, it ends up being we get about 25% of that $60,000. So we get about $15,000 this year from the state, and we pay the $45,000. Dr. App started a cohort this past fall of teachers that were interested in getting their NBC. I think he has 20 that have dedicated themselves to getting their NBC. It's a 3-year process. I don't know how many teachers are going to finish in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, but as they finish, if those all 20 teachers finish, that's another $200,000 we're going to have to come up with on local level, minus 25% from the state that we get to cover those teachers. And that's going to continue to grow. He has another cohort coming up each year. So, any questions on pillar? No, that's one more slide, I think. Can you move it? D. Okay. Yes, the career ladder implemented by 2024. As Dwayne said, it's not developed yet. It's got to be negotiated by collective bargaining process the same way as the $60,000 has to be negotiated. The Maryland State Department of Education was supposed to give us a draft career ladder at the end of January. I still haven't seen it. So we're waiting to see how that's going to all come together. And the other thing Dwayne talked about was 60%. Well, if a teacher's only going to teach 60% of their time, are we going to need more staff in our school? And what counts toward the teaching time? Is it PD? Does that count? Planning time count? I think it does, but all that has to be worked out at the level, negotiations and the state level. So, any questions on Pillar 2? No? Okay. Pillar 3, Dr. Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. So I hope that you're seeing as we move through these pillars the interconnectedness of the pillars. Even though the pillars stand alone, they really are all connected. And so when we look at the college and career readiness pillar, it goes right back to pillar 1. And so we start with the implementation of making sure kids are where they need to be, starting in kindergarten with the KRA, following them to 3rd grade, following them to 6th grade, following them to 9th grade, following them to 10th grade. And in that time, wrapped up in this pillar, is all the supports that go into place, which some of it you just heard about when we talked about teachers helping our neediest students. So when we talk about teachers being on the career ladder, master teachers, NBC teachers, those teachers play into this pillar, because those are going to be some of the teachers that are providing the extra supports along the way. Because the goal of this pillar is for us never to have a student leave 3rd grade who can't read, to never have a 6th grader who's not on grade level, to never have a 9th grader who hasn't earned the amount of credits in their 9th grade year that they'll graduate by the time they're a senior, to be college and career ready by 10th grade. So there's an interconnectedness that's based on research. And you all probably know this, but we actually, in our country, we build jails and we build institutions like jails based on the number of students who can't read in 3rd grade. Because if you can't read in 3rd grade, you are more likely to be incarcerated. So that's a formula that's used in this country. So we want our kids to be educated. We know it starts there. So that's a part of this pillar, is making sure all of our students are on grade level, aligning our curriculum with where we need to be on state assessments. Mr. Taylor talked about those earlier. Providing the resources needed for, you can see there, end of grade 3. And then when you get to high school, the good part of this is that we already have a model in our county for the last 2 things. We have schools in our county who have already created AP pathways and CTE pathways for all their students, as well as individualized plans for students after they leave us. Those are the last 2 things. And so when we think about pathways and we talk about college and career readiness in Pillar 3, we're talking about CTE, which also includes the military, because junior ROTC in our schools is now a CTE pathway. So we talk about a trade, we talk about the military, we talk about dual enrollment. We already have an agreement with Warwick Community College, and we talk about advanced placement courses, which we already have a full advanced placement course. We already have a school who's developed out AP pathways. We've added one more. So when it comes to actually having these resources, we already have our partnership with Warwick, so we're already down that road. So my piece of the pillar is really going to focus on making sure students are where they need to be all along, as well as every student has to have an individualized plan. So we all say that because we all know that's what we want for all of our kids. We want them to have a plan. We already have a model in our district for that. We're just going to have to take it to the next level. And the same thing with the other pathways. We've been doing this, and we were talking as a group the other day. Sometimes I sit on these meetings as far as this pillar, and I think to myself, we're talking about Chicago County Public Schools. That's like a model that they hold up for us. And I'm like, we've been doing this for like 10 years. So I feel really good about where we are as far as answering the questions. The challenge is going to be paying for dual enrollment, and Vince will talk about that. The money that comes along with these things, because certainly we can put in the extra legwork to make sure our students have a pathway and that they stay on track, but Mr. Tolbert is going to talk about the cost of doing that.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace. Yeah, I was at lunch a couple months ago with a friend of mine, and he's thumbing through his phone, and Del Mar now, I think he said, "Oh, look, dual enrollment's free now for all kids." I'm like, no, it's not free. We're going to pay for it. The school system's going to pay for it. It's not free, but that's the impression they get. It's free now. But anyway, right now, based on what we know, we're going to have an additional $200,000 increase in cost for dual enrollment fees for next year as kids enroll in more dual enrollment classes. And that number is going to continue to grow. I mean, I believe it's the state's intention that kids graduate with 2 years of community college, right, Dr. Wallace? That they have an AA degree when they finish. So those dual enrollment fees will be paid by the school system. So that number is going to continue to grow. Also with AP test, we're estimating $34,000 increase in that for FY24, and that should also continue to grow. Career and technology, CTE, I think we're in good shape with that. We have a high participation rate here at Technical High School. A lot of our kids are already getting the CTE. I believe it's like 40. So we're already above the 45% CTE, which is good news. So we don't really anticipate any additional cost in that right now. Any questions on costs related to Pillar 3? Yes, sir.
It's on. Mr. Tolbert, with all of these appearing to be some extra work for our teachers to make all this happen, and the mandate that they only teach 60% of the time, it seems like part of the cost may well be a significant amount of new staff. Is that possible, or am I just misreading something here?
Well, it depends on what counts in that 60% and what counts as teaching time. Right now, our teachers have planning time, they have PD time, they have other times that they aren't with the kids in the classroom teaching. So does that time count toward non-teaching time? We don't know for sure. But if it does, then it might not be too bad. If it doesn't, then you're looking at a lot of additional positions. And that's not really been settled yet.
You take, for example, in our high schools, we're on a block schedule. And every 3 high schools have they have modified blocks. But for example, I'll use one school for example. There's 4 periods a day, okay? They're 90-minute classes. Teachers teach 3 of those, and then they get a 90-minute planning period. So that number's getting real close already. Yeah, you know, it's 75% of the time, but if it goes to actual hours or minutes of teaching, I don't know where that would fall. So they may meet. We may be in good shape in some places and other places. Elementary is a challenge. Elementary schools are a challenge to meet that because of they have less minutes of planning, and every school is different. Less minutes of planning at an elementary, generally speaking, than the high schools do. That's one of the things that sometimes elementary teachers get a little concerned about because high schools have more minutes of planning. But we're doing a number of different things as we move forward. And as Vince has said, this is just proposed. There's 23 other school systems that are going to fight this. We're not going to be able to afford, and I will fight it, we're not going to be able to afford to hire 45 new teachers. I mean, it's just unheard of. So moving down the street with that, we've got a lot of work to do. And again, when we're presenting today, we're just giving you probably the worst case possibility as far as expense and what we would have to do as we move forward. A lot of this is far from being decided. It's what's proposed. And so we wanted you to know the full extent of it instead of saying, well, I don't think that'll happen. There are some things I don't think will happen. As a matter of fact, based on my meetings with superintendents, they have just really gone crazy about some of the things that are required that you're hearing the team present to you. So please don't walk away and say, well, we're going to break Worcester County. They're going to break the whole state of Maryland if they do it the way they're doing it right now. I just gave you my personal opinion, not my superintendent opinion. So we're going to keep working on this, and we'll probably have to get together once a year to say we're here now. As Dwayne said earlier, they changed the bill 3 different times before it even got off the ground. And so that's continuing to happen. And as I said in my opening, Ike Leggett and Rachel Heist, the 2 king and queens of this blueprint, are saying every meeting to us, and I'm just relaying to you as citizens and as elected officials, I'm just saying to you, they've said over and over again, there's going to have to be some adjustments. And there are going to have to be some adjustments.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bettina.
I heard Dr. Wallace say that part of this pillar is that we have to ensure that kids leaving 3rd grade are able to read and write. Is that basically what I heard, Dr. Wallace?
Yeah, yes.
Are we not doing that now?
We are working towards that now. This puts additional research-based practices in our toolbox. We are working very hard. I mean, you can see what our ELA scores are across the state. We are doing very well at that. I'll give our elementary folks, and Ms. Short specifically, who was in charge of literacy, our students are doing very well when it comes to 3rd grade, but they don't care where Worcester County is. They care about what it looks like across the state.
I don't care what is going on across the state either, but I do care what's going on here. Are our kids who are leaving 3rd grade meeting what the expectation is for this blueprint at this point right now?
There's no expectation. The expectation of the blueprint doesn't give us a number of third graders. The expectation of the blueprint is that we take they say that you have to take your percentage of third graders, your percentage of sixth graders, and it has to become very, very small. That's literally the definition. There's not like No Child Left Behind. If you remember, No Child Left Behind was 100% of kids have to be. It's not like that. They've given us no marker of what it has to be except less.
Is there, when kids graduate high school, that they can actually function in the world without going to college?
Yes, that would be the CTE pathway, which
Okay.
includes
Are
the
our
military.
Are our kids at that level now?
Yes. Our students are we're doing the very best we can, and when we know better, we do better.
Okay.
But I would say that, this is all, we already have Naviance. Many of the things, which is a plan for students along the way to either be CTE, to follow one of these pathways already. Remember when I said, we're doing a lot of these things already in Worcester County? We have those things in place. And I believe to the best of our abilities we are.
Chip, we want every kid to read. Worcester County Public Schools, and I'll speak as the representative of Worcester County Public Schools, has in place for every child when they're leave third grade, to answer your question, to be able to read. We have extra assistance beyond measure to make sure that that kid reaches that. There are so many external factors, and we know that every kid in the United States of America, by the third grade, not every single kid can read for a variety of reasons. We experience those trauma-related experiences with kids today. We get kids sometimes that will literally, I don't even know how they breathe. And we're not exempt from that here in Worcester County. But I will tell you, with all the assurance that I can give you, that we put thanks to you, thanks to our board, every resource available so that we meet the needs of every single kid to get them to the level of being successful. Do we do it 100% of the time? Pretty close, but sometimes there's one or two that we're challenged with. We even look externally for help for young people who experience those trauma-related, for example, situations. I want to believe that every one of our kids, and I do believe this as a superintendent of schools, that every one of our kids is given every opportunity and beyond to experience a level of success in every grade, but talking specifically here in third grade. Because of your willingness as commissioners and because of our board's focus on meeting the needs of our kids and the resources that you provide, we are able to take our kids to, I'll put our county up with anybody in this state, probably nationally, to making sure that those kids read and meet that level when they're in third grade.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on Pillar 3? If not, we'll move to Pillar 4. Williams?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Williams. I'm our coordinator of school health and mental health. I'm the one chief, or the one person that's not a chief doing this, so you don't see me as much, so I thought I would introduce myself. So I'm very excited to share information about Pillar 4. Pillar 4 is providing more resources to ensure that all students are successful. Not only is that my passion, but also some funding comes along with some of these initiatives, so maybe I'll put some smiles on your faces, right? So there's 4 areas that we focus on in Pillar 4. One is providing more support for English language learners, and really the plan around English language learners and around special education students is making sure that the funding we receive is going to those students, that it's not serving the general population of the school, but really the dollars are being used to make an impact with that population. So the other area that's very exciting is that we are creating community schools through the concentration of poverty grants that are associated with the blueprint. So concentration of poverty is determined based on a 3-year average of the number of students that are living in poverty at a rate of 70% or more. So currently, if 70% or more of your students are coming from households of poverty, you would be qualified as a concentration of poverty school. And then there is funding that comes along to create a community school model, which basically is a lot of what we already do in Worcester County, having strong partnerships with our health providers, our mental health providers, being really creative and innovative and thinking about new partnerships to access needs. It involves an annual needs assessment where we get input from the community, from the students, from the staff to figure out where those specific needs are and pour our efforts into those specific needs. Next year we will have 4 concentration of poverty schools. We have currently Pocomoke Elementary School, Pocomoke Middle School, and Cedar Chapel Special School. And we're already doing some exciting things, even though this is our first year with that grant, to help serve those students. Yes.
Do you ever work with the families in these poverty schools? Is that part of your?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the community school model is, I would say, the #1 focus of a community school model is family engagement. So we have, through concentration of poverty schools, it is required that you have a community school liaison, which is a person who should be out in the community doing home visits, helping to make the school a more warm and welcoming place if there's a family that's feeling like, you know, they've had a poor relationship or they themselves had a bad experience in school. So that is, the outreach is tremendously important in those models, yes. And then the last objective is around enhancing access to behavioral health services and physical health services. So we've created a school-based health center at Pocomoke High School, and we're looking at expanding that, and as we go forward, doing as much as we can to bring the resources directly to the students, to remove any barriers for access to dental care, physicals. We already have a lot of partnerships with the health department and Chesapeake Healthcare around providing school-based therapy. We also, in order to enhance the response to behavioral health needs, have been bringing on, you know, our own school social workers, which many schools in Maryland have, and we've been increasing those numbers, and it's really allowing us to provide more direct services, direct mental health services to students and respond. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I have a problem with the whole idea of the community-based school system, because what is the purpose of a school? Is to provide education and academics.
Yeah, I will say, yes, I absolutely would like you, but I would say, I was just about to say, which goes perfectly with what you were saying, that a rising tide lifts all boats. And as we've talked about, we can only be as successful as the most vulnerable among us. And so, as Mr. Taylor talked about, all of the trauma and barriers that can come along with student success, we are in a position to help remove those barriers and help all students be successful, because ultimately they're going to go out into our community and be part of our society, and we want to have a thriving.
I think also the community schools model is actually a scientific proven based model that we're getting assistance from. So to be very honest with you, like, I'm still learning about it. To have such a strong opinion about it, I would encourage like all of us to like learn more about what the community schools model is, because even myself, like, I am not on Lauren's pillar team, but I oversee Lauren and the work she does, and I'm still learning about what the community schools model is. And it is many, as we sat through a meeting till 9 o'clock last night, a large part of this is us listing what services we're partnering with. So the health department is listed. We had to list out our faith-based partners. So it's not the school system taking on this responsibility. That's not the community schools model. The community schools model is that we have a hub of services available to every family, and we're making sure that those services are getting coordinated. So it's not like a community schools model, like, oh, it's just a school that's responsible for the whole community. That's not what the model is.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I think my reservations with this whole idea of a community school model is that, like I said, what is the purpose of a school? Is to provide academic education. Mm-hmm. And when we include all these other things, it's pulling away from the academics in a sense, because it's not, kids are going to school for school, not for all these extra community engagements. To me, that is a family issue that should be left up to the family to get taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay,
Research would say that you can't learn.
Dr. Wells, I agree with you, but you hit it right on the head, Katie, right on the head. When I went to school, you went to school, our families took care of it. The problem with us today, we are getting over 50% of our kids that are coming to us that don't have a family base sense at home. And that's where the trauma, the increased trauma that we're seeing regularly, and I certainly couldn't agree with you more in that we are here to teach kids an academic skill set. That's our job. But because of the needs of our young people coming in, we can't teach them unless we have some other services to support them. And that's challenging for us. When I say us, the school system. And that's where the problem lies. You know, I didn't have to be taught anything that was, because I had a two-parent home life and I was taught at home too. Unfortunately, majority, and the number is increasing with this level of trauma, and I use the term trauma. It's increasing yearly with us, almost daily in some cases. We didn't used to have, when I was told we had to hire a mental health coordinator years ago, or a few years ago, and we hired Lauren Williams, there was no such thing as a mental health coordinator. What are you talking about, a mental health coordinator? And right now, I have a goal, and my team will tell you, I want a mental health worker in every one of our schools. It's the only way. I've got them in schools, and our counselors are saying to me, we could use 2 or 3. And I said, that's pie in the sky. But I never thought I'd see a day in my life where mental health coordinators had to be in our schools to help our young people. It's sad. It's really sad. The whole situation is, it breaks your heart to see some of the things that are kids that are dropped off on our doorstep. And I'm going to tell you something, it's nothing else I've learned, is that if you don't get inside the mental state of a child and get it help, we're fighting a losing battle to try to teach them anything academically. And so that's where our challenge is.
I agree with that, but I think my takeaway at all this is I don't want our schools getting pulled into all these other directions and then losing focus on what we are really supposed to be focusing on, and that's reading, writing, mathematics, science, history. Because if you look at our test scores, yes, we did rank first in Maryland, but look at what our scores actually were. They were 64% for ELA. They were 37% for mathematics. And to me, that's a D and an F. So we are truly failing at the basics. And when we have more of these community engagements, yes, they are great to help our students that need that additional help, but I feel like at times it's almost pulling away from what the true goal is of the schools and what education is supposed to be for.
Kids can't learn if they're hungry. And I'll take this back to a really low level because I think that's kind of understandable. When kids come to school hungry, they can't learn. That we've understood for how long? How long, Dr. Andes? You might know. I'm putting you on the spot. 50 years? 50 years we've understood. And I'm standing here as the daughter of a person who lost their battle with mental health, who coincidentally dropped out of high school. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence. They're lined up. Third graders who can't read, not a coincidence that they end up incarcerated. We've understood for 50 years that if you're hungry, you can't learn. I'm Annette Wallace. Beth Shockley Lynch is a teacher. I don't ask Beth Shockley Lynch to give mental health counseling. I'll tell you this too. When we partner with Chesapeake Health, guess who else can't learn? Kids who are sick. And guess what happens when little Bill Gordy is sick and he sits next to little Bill Buchanan? Little Bill Gordy is sick, he gives it to Bill Buchanan. Bill Gordy's parents can't take him to the doctor. Bill Buchanan's parents pick him up, take him somewhere. We partner with Chesapeake Health. We have healthcare centers. We don't pay for those. They're provided to us. And now little Bill and little Bill can lose no instructional time because they can walk down to the nurse's office. Chesapeake gets his prescription, delivers it to his house. So even students like my niece and nephew won't even have to lose instructional time. And these outside activities take place outside the school day. With the things that I feel like I hear you saying are taking place, extra things outside of the school day. But you can't learn if you're hungry, and you can't learn if you have mental health challenges. And there's no amount of support instructionally that's gonna help you do math when you are suffering from a mental health challenge that is not your fault. So it's very personal to me, but I will tell you from a healthcare access, mental or physical, we aren't paying for these things. We're not controlling these things. We're not in control of what Chesapeake Health does. We're just a partner. And that's what Lawrence Pillar is about, partnerships. And we are only as strong as the partnerships we have with our community. So I would encourage anyone who has, especially, you serve on our board, so we're all on the same team. I would encourage anybody who wants to learn more about the community schools model. We would love, because I need to learn more. So, thank you.
And I do think it's really important to emphasize the point that all of these services are directed at building capacity in the parent, right? So we are going to the home, just like your question, we're going to the home to engage the parent. Any service that's provided is with consent from a parent, and we're helping build capacity. We're helping them understand what, when they grew up, maybe they didn't understand was a mental health concern. They thought they'd just tough it out, but they see this in their child, and that we can provide that education and help them, make their skill set stronger too. So it is part of the plan. So thank you. So those are my four areas. You ready to take over, Mr. Tolbert? Okay.
Thank you. Some costs that are associated with Pillar 4, if we would like to hire one social type worker for every school. Right now, we would need 5 additional positions to have one at each school. As Mr. Taylor said, it's very important to him. I think it's something that the students need.
Let me add to that. I want to thank the county commissioners because you have worked with us, and we couldn't do it all one time, but you have worked with us, and we're, we started with maybe one, and we're only 5 away from having one in every school. We've not asked for all 14 in 1 year, and we'll continue to chip away at it. But the board supporting that, and then the commissioners agreeing to work with us and trusting our intuition on that. Thank you to all of you for making it happen up to this point, that we're only 5 away.
And the other thing under this pillar is 4 additional elementary school counselors. The recommended guidance counselor ratio is 1, I think, for every 250 students. And in 4 elementary schools, we are not at that level. So we would request 4 additional elementary school counselors to be in compliance with this pillar. Any questions on Pillar 4 before I move on to Pillar 5? Pillar 5 is really just governance and accountability. I'm overseeing that pillar. It's basically making sure that we do what we're supposed to be doing with the blueprint, doing the reporting, getting the stakeholder feedback, those types of things. You can read it on the screen. The last one is the one that really concerns me a little bit because it talks about 75% of the revenue following the student. And in school systems, we don't have accounting systems set up to that level of cost accounting. So we're going to have to work over the next year or two to really fine-tune how we allocate those resources to each individual student. Because they're saying 75% of the comp ed funding has to go to that individual student at that school. The same thing with special ed and ELL. So it's going to be a little bit of a lift for us. And I think the system's a little flawed from the state because for special ed, not all special ed kids require the same level of services. The special education students at Cedar Chapel Special School require a much higher level of services than maybe a special education student at Pocomoke Elementary School. But the state is saying all that money has to be allocated on a per pupil basis without taking into account other things. The needs of every student vary from day to day, week to week, But anyway, that's something I'm going to have to deal with on the accounting side. That's a big concern for me. Any questions on Pillar 5? Okay. This next slide shows some information. We've spoken about the wealth formula and how Worcester County Public Schools is always considered the wealthiest county in the state of Maryland. And I tried to take some information from the latest state funding report and show exactly where we rank in different areas. And the one all the way to the left is net taxable income. As you can see, Worcester ranks 18th on net taxable income. On real property, we rank 11th in the state. And there's a couple of things I didn't include all of them on this slide, but in total wealth, we're 14th. But because of our overall relatively small enrollment, we have about 6,800 kids. When you take the total wealth and divide it by the number of students, we're the wealthiest county on a per pupil basis in the state of Maryland, and that's why we receive such a low amount of state aid. even though you can see we don't have the highest net taxable income, we don't have the highest real property, we're 14th overall in total wealth. So any questions on that? I just wanted to be clear so everybody kind of understood what the state includes in that formula, how we end up ranking the wealthiest county in the state under the state funding formula. Any questions on that?
So before I turn it back over to Todd, and I think I'm going to ask Mr. Bertino if you have a couple comments as well, or Mr. Oh, you do? I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were finished. I'm trying to get him off of here, guys. Hang in there.
Put a hook and pull me off, it's fine. No. My last slide, just really in closing, is that our plan is due March 15th for the implementation plan. So we're still developing it. As we go through that process, we could come up with some additional costs. Some things may go off. I don't know. It has to go to the state for approval. Changes to the blueprint requirements are possible in future legislative sessions. Just for example, the change they had in the comp ed, the way they included comp ed this year, with Medicaid assistance being included as direct certification, resulted in $330 million additional funds that the state had to pay out they didn't plan on. So the states all of a sudden say, wow, $330 million more that we didn't have planned for. So that may implicate some changes going forward. That's just one example. What we shared today is our best estimate. We don't know what future enrollment in the program is going to be. We don't know what the student needs. Collective bargaining has to happen. Additional clarifications from the blueprint. So all these things we shared today could change and probably will change. As Mr. Taylor said, Ike said, I forget his last name, Leggett, they're building a plan as it goes down the runway. And they're expecting us to estimate costs on something that's not even built yet. So, but hopefully it was informative. Hopefully you guys learned something. And we know that we'll continue to work with the county commissioners and our board to do what's best for kids. And you would do your very best to help us, and we appreciate it. So, Mr. Taylor.
So just in closing, before I ask Mr. Bertino, then we'll turn it over to our president of the Board of Ed to close us out. Worcester County has always been a special place. It's nothing magical today because I sit in this chair. I'm born and raised here. I see what happens around us in neighboring counties. I see where we have always excelled in areas because we've been a community, even when we disagree, we've been a community that has worked together for the betterment of whatever situation we're working towards. You know, it's for an example, our law enforcement partners, one in the back and the two up front here, they are great partners for this school system. I go to other counties and law enforcement and their leadership can't even sit in the same room because they're same table, because they're at each other and there's odds. That doesn't happen here. We do have something very special. I want you all to know also that I know there's more to the picture in this county besides the Board of Education and Worcester County Public Schools. But I also believe that if we put our faith in our education system and our emergency services and law enforcement and things like that, it moves a county in the right direction. I believe that to the core. I've seen it as a kid, I've seen it as a young adult, and I now see it as I'm getting into the senior years of my life. And so Worcester has always done that. We believe in what we believe in. And so as we go down this road, I leave you with this. We will get to the end of this train, or the end of this track with this train. There's going to be some bumps on the road. There's going to be some differences of opinions. There's going to be some things that we may think we ought to do, but we can't do. And so one thing that I encourage all of us, and I want to give, since I can only speak in my 6 years, 7 now, tenure, is that we've kept the lines of communication open. We've not gone around the corner and talked about it and thrown surprises. Every body of commissioners that I've had the privilege of working with, from when I came on as Jimmy was president, I worked through with Diana as president, Joe Matresic as president, and now with Chip, we have been able to sit down to the table and work things out. I agree everything can't be done for us. It's impossible. But again, I want us to make sure that we're working through this and we keep those lines of communication open moving forward, because that's the only way we're going to accomplish anything. And so I encourage all of you, our new board member, our new commissioners. I know Eric's not here today. I've said this to the previous board. We're all in this together. And I'm a citizen and a taxpayer first of Worcester County, and I have the privilege, the distinct privilege of leading this school system. And I believe in this school system, and I also believe in doing it right and making every tough decision we have to make. I have to make very tough decisions financially before I even go to our board and go to the county commissioners. I've got over 1,000 employees over there that I have to say no to 100 times a day. And so I want you to know that this school system is committed to doing first and foremost what's right by kids, all kids. That's why it's public school. And then secondly, making sure that we are very cognizant of how we spend our dollars. We just don't throw money away. I don't spend one penny without walking down to Mr. Tolbert's office and say to him, tell me the pros and cons if I go down this road. Every day I'm down there, or I'm on the phone with him, or he's in my office. So I am very, very particular when it comes to spending our taxpayers, as Mr. Bertino called it, our taxpayer dollars, because I'm paying taxes too. But the end results is that we have great kids, we have great community, we have great employees, we have great bus drivers, we have everything is good about it. Even when we don't always agree, it's still good. And together we've made a huge difference, and I think we will continue to do that if we keep our focus centered in the right direction. So with that, I thank you for coming today. We certainly will keep it open. There's nothing we hide from anybody, nothing. You're welcome to ask us any questions, and we will answer those questions with integrity and with truth. And I assure you of that. So with that, I know Chip wants to make a couple comments as the President of Commissioners, and then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Ferrante. Mr. Bertino?
Well, on behalf of the Commissioners, thank you very much for inviting us here today to do this. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation. I agree with you. This is a special place. We are very fortunate that we do work together the way we do, and we don't always agree. But you look across this county, and there's a lot of relationships that have been built, and a lot of relationships that we rely on to get through situations like this. I would ask if the Commissioners and staff could have a copy of this presentation. If you could forward that to Kim Moses, and she can disseminate that to all of us. I think that, as you said, the Board of Education and education in this county is not the only thing that the Commissioners look at. But I believe very strongly, and I suspect I'm not alone among the Commissioners to say, that we're very fortunate to have the people in place that we do. But as I look, and I speak for myself as a Commissioner, as I look at what the state is doing, I do have some takeaways from what was presented here today. One is that it's going to cost the taxpayers of this county more money, but we don't know how much yet. Another observation is that we are now paying for college tuition. Taxpayers are paying for college tuition. So it's not just K through 12 anymore. Now we're at grades 13 and 14, if you can look at it that way. That's a responsibility that's now being borne, or will be expected to be borne, by taxpayers. We are also, as we look across the bridge, not here, because this is directed across the bridge, we are also looking at a loss of local control. And we are taking what I believe should be handled by us with the special relationships that we have, and we are losing that local control. It's costing us more, we're losing local control, and I think that that is something that we need to deal with in some form or fashion. But I agree with you, Mr. Taylor, and everybody else here. We will get through this together, but at some point, I very much believe that the taxpayers of this county are going to look at this and say, we're already spending more per pupil. What are we getting for our money? And especially when the state's telling us that we need to spend more. So that's something that's on our radar, and I know you feel the same way that I do on this. But at some point, the state has got to recognize we can only do so much, and we and we will only do so much. Thank you again for the presentation. Thank you for a wonderful lunch, and thank you again for hosting us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Bettino. First of all, I just want to thank our presenters. You guys did a wonderful job outlining what we had today, Dr. Rapp, Ms. Felix, Dr. Wallace, and Mr. Tolbert, and Lauren. Thank you. And I also want to give a big hand to Phil Cropper, who prepared a wonderful lunch for us today. So, glad to hear. And I thank you all for coming, and we value the relationship that we have with all of you. And you know our door is always open, so we hope that we can continue the dialogue, and we wish you a good day. And for my fellow board members, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Motion by Mr. Gordy, second by Mr. Buchanan. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming.